Welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation that explores the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Brad Keoun, who is a longtime journalist and entrepreneur in the crypto world. We're going to be discussing his previous work covering markets, tech, and protocols at CoinDesk, and how he's helping teams to implement these technologies in his current work. Brad, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Been a while, but good to connect again here. And you got a lot of exciting things in the works here. So really excited to dive in a bit. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself really quick and tell us about how you got first involved in crypto?
Sure, Aaron. Well, just first a little tangent on I used to work with you, Aaron.
Yes.
Full disclosure. And you were famously, I hope I can tell this story because it's such a great story. You famously were the head of events programming for CoinDesk, and you, during COVID, organized a virtual retreat for the entire company and convinced our CEO to buy Quest VR headsets for the entire company. And we actually had a really cool virtual retreat. I mean, it felt like super future edgy stuff at the time. And then the joke is that I never really used it that much, but my teenager took it up and is now completely addicted to it. So my wife who's over here making coffee thanks you for that. But
yeah, no, funny enough, I didn't really use it much after that either, but my wife really liked it, and we bought this like archery game where it's like a bow and arrow where you're like defending a castle from these orc invaders, and you have to shoot these guys with like a bow and arrow. And she actually got like really good at it. Like she was getting invited to play in tournaments and stuff. But anyway, that was what, like, what was July 2020, I suppose that would have been when
it was, yeah.
When the metaverse stuff first started coming out and these headsets first started coming out, and I guess they were coming out in a way that was actually like usable for average people, where I think before you had these things where it's like a smartphone you put in your glasses and and it's like kind of nausea inducing. But with these Oculus, the first edition of I think it was like the Oculus Quest was the model that we got. That was the first one that I felt like was really like, wow, a normie could just put this on and be like, whoa, like this is pretty cool, right?
There were a few people who got vertigo, but I mean, aside from that, you're right. It was surprisingly effective. It really did kind of feel like we were all in a room together in a very strange way.
Yeah, and it was interesting because you had, like, CoinDesk was kind of like a hybrid company. Like you had an office in New York where probably like 2/3 of the company worked out of, and then we had all these remote people around the world. And these people were kind of like, you just sort of saw their name on Slack, but like nobody really knew they existed. Like the guy in Australia or the guy in India. And, most people were asleep when these guys are online. So you kind of knew they existed, but you don't really pay any attention to them, But like, we got to be like in the same virtual room as all these people, like, a company of 50, 60 people. We were all in the same virtual room at the same time. It was kind of a cool experience. So I'm glad you still remember that, because it feels like
it was amazing. I guess it's like once things opened up, everybody wanted to be IRL. And so, but I mean, we proved the concept that, it works when needed.
The metaverse does have at least a niche use case, among certain demographics and audiences. So enough about that. But but let's talk a little bit more about you. Like, how did you end up getting into crypto? What was your sort of initial baptism, if you will?
Well, I mean, just real quick, I do have an electrical engineering degree from undergraduate university, and then I proceeded not to use that for 3 decades as a journalist, as first sort of a general beat reporter at the Gainesville Sun and Chicago Tribune, and then in 2000, I joined Bloomberg News and covered kind of the energy industry and the Enron collapse. And
oh, wow. That must have been pretty fun.
It was really cool. Almost driving California into bankruptcy. And then I moved to the finance team, and I covered Wall Street during the financial crisis. And I led a big investigation that won a bunch of awards into Federal Reserve emergency secret lending based on a historic FOIA that we filed against the Fed. Got all of their data on secret lending that had never before seen the light of day, and then spent like 6 months analyzing a big investigative project. And so I kind of saw firsthand just how fragile the financial system is and how it's basically just propped up by Federal Reserve emergency bailouts, and like too big to fail is maybe the biggest subsidy ever on the planet. And then we moved to Mexico. I was the deputy editor of Latin American markets and kind of saw lots of economic cycles. And then we moved to Austin, and I joined The Street. I was their chief global finance and economics correspondent, and I sort of covered the Trump economy, which I can't actually tell you what did actually happen in the Trump economy. It's like nobody actually ever says what did actually happen, and but I can tell you what happened because I covered it straight, like very straight. What
did happen?
Well, I mean, if you want to know, I mean, he basically had the huge tax cuts, and it jacked up the economy. And he said it was the greatest economy ever, and it did speed up, but he said it had to get past 3% or even 4% for the tax cuts to pay for themselves, and his economy never got past 3%. In fact, I mean, even well before COVID, the Fed started cutting rates because the economy was already slowing down after never hitting 3%. And a lot of the stuff, he did a lot of the stuff that he said he was going to do, which was, I mean, I gave credit to him for that, like a lot of the tariff stuff, and he sort of renegotiated NAFTA. But yeah, I mean, basically his playbook ended up being just like every other president's, which is deficit spending.
Never fails, right? Never fails.
Yeah. He was criticizing the Federal Reserve. I mean, he's criticizing the Federal Reserve all the time. And the Federal Reserve was had his back because they were cutting rates for him. But anyway.
And then, slight digression there, but
we digress. So anyway, I was working for The Street, and I had a friend here who lives in Austin, who sort of I consider to be my crypto godfather, and he he was a former Wall Street trader who had gotten in, and he kind of walked me over the credibility chasm that probably a lot of people have to cross. And then one thing led to another, and I was introduced to one of the top editors at CoinDesk, and then I got a job there, and I've been down the rabbit hole ever since.
Yeah, I still remember when you joined. I think they announced you were joining on Monday, and then on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, there was like a big sort of regime change. Like the guy that hired you was fired and ousted, and then you're like, "What the heck did I just get myself into?"
It was my introduction to crypto volatility.
Yeah, exactly. Day 3 on the job, and the guy that hired me is now been replaced. But anyway, you had a good run there. You were there for like 5-6 years. You're doing a lot of markets coverage. I mean, I used to read your markets newsletters every day. It was like my Bible, right? And then you also did. Most recently you were running the tech and protocol side of things. So you actually went from being markets guy to being more on the tech side. So maybe talk a bit about your evolution there.
Well, I guess I would say that I'm a pretty hardcore journalist. I'm constantly trying to get closer to the core of the story. And after a couple of years, covering crypto markets and super fascinating, kind of watching the evolution of crypto markets over those couple of years, as they started to trade more in sync with macro markets, global macro markets. And then I could see that a lot of the action was really in the tech development. And that was obviously kind of the genesis of the whole movement and the whole scene with the money and the ICOs and how projects get funded and how devs get funded and, kind of the differences between Bitcoin and everything else and the governance and how the tokens work. And I just got super fascinated by it all and wanted to know how it worked.
Oh, very cool. And then you left recently a couple months ago, and now you're doing more of a consultancy. Like you're trying to work with some different companies to help them integrate different Web3 concepts, ideas. Maybe talk a bit quickly about what you're working on right now, and then I'd love to dive into some of the themes that we saw over the last year and what you're excited about for 2025 here.
Yeah, well, let's see. I quit CoinDesk in November, and basically deciding that media needed to be reinvented. Media is just, especially the news business, just getting its lunch eaten by all of the, Google and intermediaries and the ad sides, and now AI is kind of like the death blow. People aren't even clicking anymore because they just get the answers from the AIs. And some of the media companies are cutting deals with OpenAI to provide their content to like ChatGPT, and Dow Jones cut a big deal, and that's kind of something that's available to big media organizations, but not really to kind of ordinary run-of-the-mill, journalism that, sort of informs our daily society. And so the question is, how do we find a way to sustain professional journalism in the 21st century? And I kind of ran the math in my head a lot, and I decided you basically just need to start with a blank slate, start from scratch and build from the ground up. And so in that sense, that was going to be that was what I was going to do as my mission. And I kind of came to the epiphany that my advantage in this case was having zero bags. So I wasn't going to have to protect any legacy interests. I wasn't going to have to deal with kind of legacy infrastructure or legacy technology. I could just kind of pick off the shelf what is the best now. And I feel like the timing's really good because, blockchain has really gotten modular. It's a lot easier to kind of plug different things in. And AI is also, it's coming at the same time where AI is just absolutely changing the world, and it's giving us all sorts of productivity tools. It's actually, in addition to becoming kind of the front end of blockchain, it's actually it's really helpful for building a company. I'm like building my own website, and I literally built it last Friday on this design platform called Canva. And I just found it, it was actually recommended to me by one of the AI chatbots. Like, hey, what's a good tool? What's a good tool to build my website? And that one came up. I was like, all right, I tried it. It was really good. And now I'm having trouble with my domain settings. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty. Anyway, that's my journey.
So that's super interesting, and I like how you're approaching this, right? Because you've spent your whole career in this industry, right? You've kind of seen the whole evolution of. I mean, back when you started, you've been in this for 30 years, right? So you've back in the 90s when there were still print newspapers, and you drank your morning coffee and read your print newspaper, your Wall Street Journal or whatever. And then it's obviously evolved into more digital media in the 2000s. And I remember when the newsletters became a big thing in the 2010s when the newsletter kind of became the new version of the newspaper, right? And then there's just been all these different monetization challenges where the business model has just been repeatedly just having its lunch eaten over and over again. And I think even what we're seeing with CoinDesk currently is perhaps a symptom of some of that, right? We don't have to necessarily get into that, but but every media company is sort of facing that, where this dilemma where your only real option to be a viable media company is to be owned by some sort of Jeff Bezos, Barry Silbert, Rupert Murdoch type figure who just sort of subsidizes you as a loss leader for his other interests. That's the only real viable business model. So I love how you're taking, you've recognized this and you're saying look, how can we incorporate some of these new technologies and just build something from the ground up that's not just kind of a lipstick on a pig thing? Remember back at CoinDesk, we tried implementing the desk loyalty token, right? I actually just got them out. Oh, really?
I was just making a joke about them to Elaine, our former social media director, and so I got him out and took a picture of him. She left him here after one of the consensus.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So that was like, we tried these experiments, right? Like, how can we kind of engage loyalty and just try to keep traffic coming back, right? Using a blockchain based token. But like all this stuff is kind of like just putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's not really fixing like the core problem. It's just like, hey, it's a new thing that might, kind of generate some hype for a little while, and then people will stop paying attention later. But I don't know, maybe talk a bit more about how you're approaching this, right? Because I think like I'm really kind of curious to hear like I realize you're just starting this journey, but like what's kind of like your main learnings thus far on what could this look like, right? If like this kind of vision that you're setting forth on, like how, like if you're successful, what does this end up looking like?
Well, okay. Open source. Talking about this. I mean, I haven't built this stuff, but it's in my head and I'm working on it. But I mean, there's to sort of split it up. You've got two parts. You've got the content production, right? The news production, the news gathering and news writing. And then you have the publishing, the distribution, right? So it's sort of thinking about, breaking those pieces apart, and they could be modular, right? I mean, in the old days, the New York Times, I mean, I lived in Queens for a long time, and I used to drive by the giant printing presses that the New York Times has in Queens, but the New York Times could have just sent its news to some other company and they could have printed it. And then it could have been a different company that would have had trucks that delivered it to people's driveways, or their front stoops of their apartments. But so just kind of splitting those things apart. All right. And then how do you begin to kind of put all of those different pieces on chain, right? I mean, if the idea is decentralized media, just like the arguments with blockchain and a lot of the other, other networks, is that they're more resilient because they're more distributed. They come with these benefits of transparency. You can see what's going on. And in the specific case of blockchain being used to kind of revolutionize the financial industry and kind of rebuild that from the ground up, right? You want anything that's going to be built in the year 2025 has got to have that integrated payments. Okay, I mean, you see it now in this craze with the crypto AI agents. I mean, it is so amazing that you have basically these AI bots, and they have their own crypto wallets, so that's the whole craze of the virtuals, and these, like, Base has an agent, Solana has an agent, Kit, where people can basically take these open source kits and then use them in their, integrations with their chatbots. And then and Starkware, by the way, I do have a part-time content production job with them, but I work with them a little bit. But they just came out with the StarkNet agent kit, which is the same kind of thing. But the big idea is you have to have the integration with payments. So if you want to make money in the year 2025 and beyond, you're going to have that, the most modern payments integration, and that's on blockchain. It's not going to traditional financial system. They're not going to give some AI bot,
So you're arguing that like this basically like the base layer of the media of a new sort of blockchain AI world media company has to really be like a blockchain based payment system to feed in revenue, essentially. So maybe you have this situation where it's like there's like an AI agent that's like running around, goes around scraping various news sites on your behalf as a reader or something, and it like funnels, it sends that information to you, and there's making these microtransactions behind the scenes, or I don't know. I'm just kind of brainstorming.
Yeah, no, I mean all of that.
No, that's super interesting. So maybe, yeah, like I would love to maybe kind of dive into this a bit more, like once you've maybe I don't know, maybe once you've thought it out a bit further, once you've got some bigger plans, but like, I think you're onto something here, because I've been around long enough to see where there's been a lot of people coming out with like these like blockchain for media, like projects since going back to like 2017, 18. I mean, even before that you had like Steemit, which was the kind of the blockchain based Reddit, which actually isn't a bad idea, I guess, and none of these things have like really worked. Right.
For that one was Steam was sort of taken over by Justin Sun, and then everybody quit. And now it's on Hive, is kind of the revival of Steam. And by the way, I can't get into their Discord site. It's like the caption. It's like so much harder than any other caption I've ever done in my life. I can't figure it out. If somebody
they got to keep Justin Sun out, right?
Please call me and let me know how to get in, because I can't.
They got to keep Justin Sun out of there, otherwise he's gonna come take it over.
Maybe
make the capture really hard. But like I think a lot of these things, like they've had like good intentions and they've had interesting models, but they haven't really like addressed the core problem, like maybe what you're discussing here. And then they also didn't have AI, right? They didn't have these types of tools that are just like plug and play, or like just fork this code and do whatever you want with it. Like this was not a thing that existed with some of these earlier experiments. I guess, do you think that like now is like, do you think like all the tools are available to like successfully build, a like decentralized media company? Like, do we have all the tools available for this right now? Or is this still like, we still just there needs to be a few more advancements. There needs to be a few more, or is it really more just like a fundamental business model issue at this point?
Well, I think the business model is TBD. You have to figure out what is going to make money, and how to sustainably support the journalism, and then balance the interests and manage those inherent conflicts between sponsors and the journalism. I mean, news has always been sponsored in some ways by advertisers, the media, soap commercials, on the radio shows of the 20s or whatever. It's like, it's no different from that. There's always going to be this balance, and you have to figure out how to maintain the integrity and the quality and the edginess of the journalism, and balance that, with, probably sometimes there's going to be some conflicting interests with sponsors and advertisers. And so, but I mean, the big idea is one thing that's super easy, if you can take out the middleman for a lot of these, that are eating up what's between the advertisers and the news, like Google, if you could just take out Google as kind of the middleman for all ads and kind of reinvent that paradigm, then there's a big pot of money to be grabbed there, In terms of the tech and how it works and how you can kind of gamify it and get people motivated to, why would I go here, versus some other place where I might be getting my news, or how is it delivered? I mean, those are questions, trying to figure out what are people's preferences. But technically, yeah, I do actually think all the pieces are there. Decentralized, you could have a decentralized news organization. Actually, I'm a part of Zach Guzman's DAO for trustless media coinage, and that's sort of like decentralized editorial operations or decentralized content production. And then if you have, and then you have you could have the CMS that you're building, that you're going to be working on, could be a decentralized platform. And then you could have, the Filecoin, you could store your archives of your news organization on Filecoin. Decrypt actually has a cool deal they're doing with Sui Walrus, which is the new decentralized file storage that they're building on.
Well, it's actually a super relevant use case, right? Because we've talked about this before, just the two of us, where, the link rot issue is a huge problem in journalism, right? Like you were telling me, like that Federal Reserve story that you FOIA the FOIA story that you broke like back in the financial crisis, like that like the links to that are just like dead. You were telling, like you can't even find that anymore, right? Is that so for like that's a blow on your career, like that you're like, this is my work, and like now it's just disappeared. Like we don't even know where to find
I mean,
stuff.
it's also, it's a blow. I mean, I view it as a blow to
society,
humanity.
People,
people were just like, I don't see anything about emergency Federal Reserve lending, So
yeah, but maybe, I mean, I don't know. I would love for you to riff on that a bit. Like, why is this issue of link rot and just having a better sort of just like long-term archival storage solution for media like so important? I would love your head reporter perspective on why that would be a critical use case.
Well, I mean, one thing that I've learned over my years of evolving through the various technologies is nothing's permanent. Nothing's permanent. I think about one time I had all these photos from when my kids were babies and, or before, and I had all those loaded on my 2000 Mac, whatever, 2005, 6, I guess. I'm not that old, but, but 2000, I think that Mac crashed probably like 2005, and I lost all of those baby photos, and then that was kind of before I started backing everything up. But, I mean, at one point I was collecting music, and I had like Frank Zappa's entire collection. I'd go to Best Buy every day and get CDs of his music. And I eventually had like almost every Frank Zappa album on CD. And then, CDs kind of went out, and now I can just like open Spotify and just listen to any Frank Zappa song I want at any time. And so it's just, my stuff's gone, but it's still there, so I guess, technology changes. So, but now, I mean, yeah, if you don't believe that, I worked for a certain news organization in the past, and don't work there anymore. I can't assure that they're going to maintain a certain story live that was there. I mean, I think the story is still there. What's gone is some of these, the David Yanofsky, our graphics, our data visualization journalist at the time, who was so good. And we worked so hard to build these data visualization tools. And I'm wondering if, Bloomberg's website even supports that. I'm sure they've been through a couple, kind of web redesigns since then. But yeah, it's just like my experience as a user, you just lose it.
Yeah, well, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for, like, especially if this is valuable information for humanity that society would benefit, future generations might benefit from, or if there's another financial crisis, like, okay, we should go look at what happened back in 2008. But for a journalist, an individual professional content creator, like your bylines, your articles that you produce, that's basically your resume, right? So, if like, hey, I worked for 20 years at Bloomberg, but like all my articles are like mysteriously missing, then like, how does anybody know I actually worked at Bloomberg, So, and even if the articles maybe aren't that, critically important to humanity or society, but like they are evidence of like, that is your, that's your sort of collection of work, right? That's your resume essentially. Right. So for career building purposes, it is a really big deal.
I mean, news organizations might go bankrupt and cease to exist, and so who's maintaining the records at that point?
Yeah, it's a huge issue, right? And it's one that we've explored a little bit at Filecoin Foundation as well. We've done a few different pilots and things and kind of proof of concepts around this. Definitely keen to do more of that type of stuff because I think it's the use case is just so obvious.
I believe Cami Russo put her podcast.
We did. We have got a couple pieces of content of Cami's actually that are stored on Filecoin. I think it's like a documentary video that she produced, and then and a couple of podcast interviews that we've stored on the network, which is kind of a cool use case, right? Just sort of a proof of concept, just showing that this is like something you can do.
Yeah. But I mean, famously, the video just takes up so much storage, like people can't.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't realize, for people that don't like work with video, like you don't realize like how much, when you realize like the quickest way, the easiest way to like transfer files, sometimes it's like mail a hard drive. It's like, wait a minute, like that's, but anyway, just kind of wrapping things up here, but I wanted to just get your thoughts on, let's put on your journalist hat again here. And like, what are you excited about in kind of the decentralized, like whether it's centralized infrastructure, decentralized AI, we're obviously we talked about the agent stuff a little bit, but like, what are you there's a lot of hype right now in the market, but like, what are you seeing right now that's like really piquing your interest where you're like, wow, this might be a real thing that we should be paying attention to?
I would just say broadly, the intersection of AI and blockchain is a pretty powerful combination. When I first started going down the blockchain rabbit hole and realized how powerful that technology was, and I was just blown away. And I think probably a lot of people in crypto are like this. They're so far down the crypto rabbit hole, and then AI. Probably a lot of people were paying attention to AI, but a lot of people, it's just kind of with the generative AI, kind of coming out of nowhere, and all of a sudden that stuff is so good, with so many applications, and you just use it and you're just blown away. And I've talked with a couple crypto blockchain types who are like, yeah, like AI's blind spot for me, and it was for me, and I've really started going down the rabbit hole. But Michael Casey, our former chief content officer, is kind of, he's now the head of the Decentralized AI Society. But, the idea is just there's so many possibilities if you put these technologies together. It's sort of like the automobile and the internal combustion engine. It's like those go together. Different. It's kind of like the technological advances that complement each other, and I would say that has been one of my realizations. So there's like a lot of these projects like BitTensor and Morpheus. I'm actually working with some of the guys here, and some of the David Johnston, who's the head of Morpheus.
Oh yeah, we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Oh really? Okay, yeah. He's in Austin. I met with him. He's super cool, and he's really. I think he's really good at kind of helping to build the community and bring people in. And they're it's just they're still building. They still have to kind of the developer rewards, which are coming, I think, later this quarter. It's like these decentralized AI projects and virtuals, kind of showed how explosive this stuff can be. I think they're already sort of tapering down. I think some of these things are like toys. It's like,
yeah,
a little kid finds a toy and they play with it, and then they kind of get bored with it, and then it's just over in the corner.
No, it's like literally it's a like these things all surged like the week of Christmas too, like like 3x in price. So like it's like the kids like unwrapped their present, found their toy, and right. Like, oh wow, but yeah, it was like I didn't check crypto prices for like a week, and it's like, oh wow, like all these AI projects like 5x like in just a week.
Yeah.
And then now they've kind of tapered back. I think Virtuals was like on CoinGecko, was like number 45, like highest market cap coin or something. I was like, oh my gosh! Like
I did load up Luna the other day. One of the AI bots. I just had her.
Oh really? Okay.
Running in the background with my headphones on, and it was like.
Nice.
Nobody's coming anymore to talk to her, and I don't know. I felt a little sorry for her. She kept repeating the same stories.
Well, anyway, Brad, really appreciate you having you on the show here. Really, like always fun to talk to you. It's really fun hearing what you're working on right now and how you're taking your rich experience in media and journalism. And, you're not like just sitting on your laurels. You're like embracing the change, you're going with it, and you're like, hey, how can we kind of reinvent this thing from the bottom up using these new technologies and this new paradigm? So I love the ambition and the creativity and, and just being able to like kind of think outside the box, right? It's so easy. I think there's a lot of other journalists your age with your experience who are kind of in this, like, it's like the Bloomberg mindset. It's like, I'm just sort of, you're in this little world. But anyway, so I appreciate your creativity, and I really wish you the best of luck, and happy to help support you however we can here. So
thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And how can folks find you if they want to get in touch? And I guess any final thoughts from you, and then we'll wrap her up here.
I'm trying to get my website launched, but I mean, I'm on. Let's see. Probably the best way would be Telegram at Liquidity.
Liquidity is with two Q's.
Yeah, with two Q's. Yes. At Liquidity with two Q's.
Liquidity. Okay. So that's your handle for Twitter as well, or X, right? Yeah.
It is my handle for Twitter too. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Cool. Well, thanks, Brad, so much for your time. Great chatting here. And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see you on the next episode of DWeb Decoded.